Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? We made it to the second day of January 2nd, Thursday, January 2nd, in case you forgot what day of the week it is. It is easy to do in this particular week. Wednesday, yesterday, New Year's Day, I don't know. It didn't feel like a holiday day off necessarily. We didn't take it as a day off. That was part of it. And then I was running around and, out of the house for most of the day. And not because I was attending a parade or a football game or a hockey game. So, I don't know. I feel like I feel ripped off. I want another day off. And it will be Saturday. How about that? Okay, well, at any rate, Thursday, January 2nd, 364 days, if you count today yet as a full day, to go in this year. And boy, haven't we had our fill. Let's see. Since we last spoke, we had news, but not very much good information about the attack in New Orleans during New Year's Eve, in which somebody drove a pickup truck into a crowd and then jumped out with an AR-15 and started shooting. And I understand, I think by middle of the show yesterday, we knew what had happened, that the driver had also engaged in a fire with the police, who shot him and killed him. And then some point during the day afterwards, I don't know what the timing was, a cyber truck that seemed to have been packed for putting on a large display, at any rate, was, I guess, set on fire and then exploded outside of the Trump Hotel in Las Vegas, which is one of his least famous properties, as it happens. But yeah, the truck blew up, and I believe that the suspect who brought the truck there and I guess set it on fire, I don't know whether he hung around, whether it was self-immolation, I don't know, but he was, I believe, killed in this, and there's all sorts of weird happenings. And now trying to decide whether or not, I think authorities, when I stopped, making myself feel terrible reading the news about it yesterday, were stopping short of making any connection between the two. But this morning, the rumor mills are going, and I don't know, I haven't seen any solid reporting that makes me think that this either is true or meaningful. But apparently, the Cybertruck was a rented vehicle. This guy was not the owner of the Cybertruck. And the video circulated all over the social media yesterday, both of the initial explosion from the security cameras and then somebody who was in the lobby of the hotel, which is amazing because nobody patronizes that hotel. That's another weird thing. But at any rate, some video inside once the thing had already blown up and there was fire going on. But there were also, you could hear from the sounds of the video from inside the lobby that it sounded like, mortar shells were whistling and then exploding in the background. And it turns out that there were some sort of fireworks style, the large scale fireworks, mortar shells in the truck, some fuel, some accelerant, all sorts of things. So it was clearly seems designed to have been set off as an explosive device. So the truck was rented through, I forget the name of the company, but somebody who was recently advertising all over the internet and a little bit on TV that specializes in a sort of a peer-to-peer specialty car rental place. I can't remember the name of it, but perhaps we'll dig it out at some point. But anyway, he went out of his way, in other words, to rent the Cybertruck and to make sure that that's what he had to pull this particular stunt. So there seemed to be some messaging in it as well. But then it turns out I started to hear people say that the pickup truck used in the attack in New Orleans was also rented, and perhaps rented from the same company, which ordinarily doesn't mean a great deal, but it is interesting that people were going out of their way to rent specialty vehicles. But I guess if you're planning a specialized attack, you might do something like that. Then it turns out both of the suspects in people's initial reviews of their social media presence. It turns out that they were both veterans of the Army, and I heard somebody float the idea that they had been stationed at the same Army base, although, Army bases are pretty huge, and I don't know if their service overlapped, and there's no reason at this point, there's no evidence at this point that there's any sort of connection between the two, but there definitely seem to be investigating that question. So it's not entirely ruled out. Scott has just sent me something. Oh, Scott, I have a sound effect for you. When you send me things like that, I can tell everybody who sent me this story. Scott! Exactly. You may recall that. That's from Austin Powers. I don't know, some of you may never have seen that, but I figured that's a good thing to have on hand every once in a while when you pitch in with a story, right? Okay. I don't know whether Greg remembers that, but Greg is here for the first time this year, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, it's been since last year that we've heard from him. And in fact, this week we haven't had a chance to get on the air with Greg. Good morning, Greg. How are you?
I'm fine. So
okay.
I'm here for my annual.
Yeah, right, okay.
This is my annual first show of the year.
Yeah.
I do that
There's
every
only
year.
once. Okay. And, all right, I'm taking a look at what Scott sent me about this situation here. Oh, yes, right. And also the news that a big arrest, an arrest here in Virginia, a guy who was making pipe bombs at his house and I don't know where.
Selling them on eBay.
Is that what he was doing? I don't know. I got no idea what he was up to, but apparently
an Etsy thing. I don't know. I mean, people just do weird things these days.
It's very crafty. It's nice. People are working cottage industries, but it may be. I don't know whether this is meant to. I'll have to scan this thing. This is a whole big page of this, but maybe there's a connection between that guy and some of the others. I don't know. I guess when you have so much going on, so much explosive news. You got to start to wonder. But New Year's Day, I guess, will bring it out. This guy hadn't launched an attack, right. Though I guess they suspected that he might.
Not a good thing.
You can't just collect them and put them on the shelf.
Well, they're bespoke, and you can have your own name written on it and whatever. All sorts of colors.
Yeah,
artistic.
He did write on
packaging.
Apparently, some of them had the word lethal written on them, and that was in the charging document. I was like, what are you gonna do? He wrote lethal on it. Clearly meant somebody was supposed to be killed by this. I don't know. It's
the
very
guy wrote,
weird.
"Arrest me, I'm a terrorist."
Yeah, kind of. So apparently they've been watching him for some time, and now, of course, that hatches any arrest like this will hatch conspiracy theories. But we got to figure out we shut the whole thing down so we can figure out what's going on or something
Free
like
Luigi.
that. Oh yeah, well, that's a growing movement that I assume will go nowhere and
so there are many, many, many different things written about this combo.
Yeah.
Of Trump Tower and a Tesla blowing up. One of my favorites is from Melanie Dirigio, who wrote, "If you're going to choose a metaphor for our current state of politics, a Tesla Cybertruck exploding and burning in front of a Trump hotel in a city where millions of Americans go each year to lose money. That's pretty spot on."
Yeah, I did say, I think Helen Kennedy was saying, well, we're done with memes for the year. We got all we need. It clearly seems like some sort of message being sent there. Just when things blow up, I don't know what the message is.
Symbol of excess parked outside the shrine to grift and failed promises. That's pretty good.
Yes, that was nicely turned. Is that part of the thread you were reading?
People can write. It's always nice to see.
Good job, people. Yeah,
but I thought
Not
I'd
AI.
start with something I thought was interesting and caught my eye as it came to this and the New Orleans stuff, which we'll also talk about.
Okay.
And that's an essay by Kristen Soltis Anderson, the pollster, Republican pollster, who wrote, "Something important is unfolding in America that hasn't happened in a while," which is sort of a twist on things. We're not as divided as people think for two reasons. One, the country has moving a bit to the right, so therefore closer together, based on the last election. But more importantly, nobody trusts anybody about anything, and so that unites us.
We're united in our disunity.
Yeah. Other once admired institutions are finding themselves in similar situations, and she lists a few. Take higher education. Less than a decade ago, colleges and universities are trusted by 57% of Americans. Today, Republican trust in higher education is 20%. Democrats has trended downward, though at a slower pace. And here's the interesting part. It's like the business executive from the insurance company who got snuffed.
Murdered.
This cross-partisan rise in distrust has caught countless leaders and executives off guard. This year, PricewaterhouseCoopers surveyed business executives and found 90% of them thought customers trusted them a lot.
Okay, well, that is dumb.
Only 30% of customers surveyed agreed. In my work discussing public opinion surveys with executives, I'm always struck by the number of successful leaders who are surprised that more Americans don't give them, or their industry, the benefit of the doubt or see the good in what they're doing. Elon Musk immediately comes to mind. Not Trump. He knows he's a grifter.
I guess so. I mean, well, he's not.
But Musk really believes that people think I'm doing great on Twitter. I'm really popular. I'm smart. I'm funny. I'm handsome. I'm always cute when I jump in the air and do jumping jacks. Everybody loves me.
Yeah.
Regardless of intention, she writes, the reality is we're in a low trust moment, and it binds right and left together.
I don't know.
Now, part of what's driving this are the ways in which the faults of our institutions are laid bare and amplified at times unfairly in our current information ecosystem. And while the average American has greater visibility than ever into many of our key institutions' actions, that transparency has not led to more trust. And at the same time, actions that cause anger and shock and outrage generate attention in a way a job well done does not. Which is going to be relevant in the second part of of my segment when we talk about Jimmy Carter and his public health achievements.
Sure. All right.
Gives him credit for it. But even satisfaction with our own democracy is dreadfully low. And in bipartisan fashion, only 17% of Republicans and 38% of Democrats said they felt satisfied with the way democracy was working in our country.
Well,
in the last year, figures that are miles from the generally satisfied view of Americans as recently as the late 1990s, when people trusted Bill Clinton, or even if they didn't trust him, they thought he was a lovable rogue and gave him the benefit of the doubt. That stuff doesn't happen anymore.
That's in hindsight, sort of a fairly amazing statement, right? Well, mostly people, everybody felt they trusted Bill Clinton. Really? That's interesting.
No, well, not
everybody could.
I mean, we knew he was a jerk, but he was our jerk, and that was okay.
Yeah. Okay. Well, he does policy over here, and then other stuff over there.
And by the way, the economy was great, so who cares about the rest?
Yeah, that's sometimes the way things work in this country. Even when the economy is great, you can just say it's not, because that's something that's legitimate to be mad about in America.
And then she goes and opines about things that won't happen. If Mr. Trump wishes to retain the support he cultivated in the election, he cannot just smash the old things. He must build things that are in touch and responsive.
Stop.
To keep his coalition together, the institution he leads must deliver on their promise of prosperity and peace. And that's what struck me. It's not just the idea that nobody trusts anything. So when we're talking about what's the relationship between the Tesla blowing up in New Orleans, I don't know, but whatever you tell me, nobody's going to believe it anyway.
That's true.
On the one hand, that was one of the things I thought. And the other thing is that how is Trump going to sell the idea that only I can keep you safe when now that he's been elected, everything is blowing up?
Yeah, I don't know. Who are we reading from there?
Kristen Soltis Anderson, Republican pollster.
All right. I got big problems with you. Is it still Festivus? I don't know, but that's.
Well, she's a Republican pollster.
Yeah, so that's the best problem one.
On a Republican
yeah, and that's really I'm glad. All right, thank you for reminding us of that and who she was, because I was like, well, hold on a second now. Like the trust in government thing is like that's been the Republican program, and gee whiz, it's enormously successful with Republicans. Has it also been successful in making Democrats doubt the integrity of our democracy or be satisfied with the results of our democracy? Yes, because we have witnessed your attacks on it and you have damaged it greatly, and I'm unsatisfied about the damage. You're getting Well, similar to like the old healthcare responses. Oh, you're unsatisfied with the direction the healthcare reforms have gone? Yes, one, because I didn't want any, and two, the other person says because it didn't go far enough. All right, well, there's unity in dissatisfaction with healthcare reform.
Right.
Nah, that's not unity. That's your
exactly.
version of unity. You're
Tinker
a Republican.
with,
that's why I don't vote for
nobody's
you.
going to be happy. You either didn't go far enough or you went too far.
Yes. Okay. So I think not unlike most Republican pollsters, at some point in their public career, appears to be intentionally misreading things for a political point, but I'm sure she'd deny.
But the fact that nobody trusts anything is absolutely true.
That's true. There are just very different reasons for it, and that's not unity.
But, no matter what you read, nobody's going to take it, for granted.
Look, I don't believe her right now.
Like NBC News. This Tesla was stuffed with fireworks, gas canisters, and a few other things, as you were mentioning.
Yeah, bad idea.
So officials have now concluded the blast was intentional.
Yes, okay. Seems fair.
Okay, fine. I will accept that.
I will pay you this week. What else?
Who did it and why?
Yes, right.
We don't know. It's it still remains suspicious.
Okay. I thought they had a suspect named, or at least some corner of the internet had decided that's the guy, and somebody else's life has been ruined. I don't know which.
A possible terrorist attack. So I'm reading from the official legacy media news because I don't believe stuff I read online without it being confirmed.
I like to read it, and then I say, it tells me what I need to go confirm. That's all. Right. And I get to say in the morning, I don't know if this is true. This sounds like crap, but hey.
So this is only 3 hours old, and I haven't seen any names. But there were gasoline canisters and large fireworks mortars at the back of the truck.
Well, that
I don't know how they
happened.
ignited, said the sheriff.
Well, they're inflammable actually, but we all say
set them on fire. How?
Yeah, right. With a flaming arrow from a long distance away. It was a Viking did it.
Yeah,
a bereaved Viking giving the Tesla a funeral. It's clearly, I have to agree, it seems intentional. And yeah, you certainly by now have learned America should be united in our belief that you should be careful about deciding that somebody's Facebook page that you want to attack because you think they were the suspect. Maybe hold on and find out.
Yeah,
true.
So just take your time with that stuff.
Sure.
So meanwhile,
we're united.
This thing happens in New Orleans,
right?
And this seems pretty clearly terrorism. And that's not just because there was an ISIS flag in the car, and not just because the guy ran into a bunch of people intentionally, but also, is being described as somebody who has sworn allegiance to ISIS. And the whole attack mirrors what happened in Munich and other places, France, where people trying to declare allegiance to the Islamic State drove vehicles into crowds. That seems to be a thing. Yeah. So there's a lot of circumstantial evidence suggesting that, this one at least was terrorism. Whether they're tied together or not, totally unclear.
Right.
It's just that, again, you get to the institutional distrust. Nobody trusts the New Orleans Police Department. They were very defensive about the whole thing. There was supposed to be barriers, concrete
trucks are 8 feet high.
Sanitation trucks lined up so that you couldn't do this on Bourbon Street, exactly for this reason.
I see.
Bourbon Street had, basically anti-tank stuff put out in front so that you couldn't. However, apparently they were removed for renovation so that they could be totally in place and ready to go for the Super Bowl, which is what they thought was going to be the event that needed protecting.
There's some logic
were sanitation
to
trucks lined up, which is what you do when you're anti-tank concrete things or in the shop.
In the shop, there's a light that won't light on one side.
That's what they were very defensive about. And of course, nobody trusts them. So, like,
for
what
them
happened
to be defensive.
and why did this happen and how did this happen and what do we need to do to make sure there's that? And how come you didn't think Bourbon Street was worth protecting? Because, like, everybody parties in New Orleans on New Year's Day. What's going on?
Right.
How come you didn't know this? Yeah, et cetera, et cetera.
3
All
days
these
you
questions
could
are being
pick
asked.
out of the
They're
calendar.
very defensive about it.
Well, they should be. That's awfully. I've never heard about. Well, this barrier needs work. Well, send it to the barrier shop to be fixed. Bring cement there and
there's
fix
a
it.
local guy. We fix it, and he's going to repair
I've never
it
heard
and
of
put it back
barriers being removed to be worked on off-site, but I'm not in that business. But yeah, in New Orleans. Well, what days? And any days you're not available with your barriers? Yeah, New Year's Eve, Super Bowl, Mardi Gras, all in the beginning of the year. How about spring? All right, that would have been a good answer. But what do I know? I don't police New Orleans.
But you've been to New Orleans.
I have not been to New Orleans.
You
How do you
haven't
know?
been to New Orleans.
I don't know. It sounded very defensive when I
It's
said
just
that.
like one of
As
those
a matter of
conference
fact,
places,
I
so
have
thought
not.
maybe you might have been.
Right. I
I've
should
been there
have
a couple
been.
of times. I mean,
Okay.
Bourbon Street is so narrow, like 6 people standing shoulder to shoulder could barely walk down the street.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it's not
You have
that
to
long. It's
stand
not
shoulder
that
to
big.
shoulder.
The French Quarter itself isn't that big. So if you're going to drive a vehicle
By the way, that's
down
our
that
quarter.
street, there's no place to get out of the way. You're going to kill people.
Yes, I assume so. Very crowded. But there were any number of places you could have done that on New Year's Eve, certainly. But yeah, that's pretty. That's a pretty obvious.
That's a
target.
pretty obvious target.
Yeah, and no
I'm
day
not-
is a
I'm
good
not
day to
even
get
a
those
professional.
barriers out of there. But yeah, because as I understand it, right, like you were saying, really kind of any day of the year, there's a big crowd on Bourbon Street.
There
But
is. I mean, it's a party place.
it's bigger
And that's why you always need
on
those
party
things
days.
there.
Yeah.
And so there's no such thing as, okay, for this particular day, we'll take it away, especially New Year's Eve, because, what could happen?
Right. Do you have anything else? We had to send our barriers in for work. Have you got anything else I could put there for now?
When should we do it? Why not New Year's Eve?
Yeah, I don't know. Well, what if somebody wants to get through with a pickup
the
truck?
important thing is the Super Bowl because,
Football.
football.
Right. Meanwhile, they had a big college football. The Sugar Bowl was the next day, but they didn't protect that.
They delayed it a day, I think.
I see. Did they have a barrier around the Sugar Bowl?
I don't know what they're going to do, but, the governor, the Republican governor, wanted to go eat out in New Orleans in the French Quarter and show people things were safe. So
the barriers are back. Right.
Yeah, I don't know.
Well, okay, that's fine. And by the way, it's our quarter. We bought it fair and square.
Yeah.
So
We call it the French Quarter, but it's ours now.
Well, I'm going to put a stop to that very quickly.
So, how much of this had to do with Trump and sending a message to Trump because he's not been nice to,
People.
Islamic generals and terrorist leaders? We have no idea. I mean, just the whole thing is so complicated. All I can tell you is that I am pretty confident that I can no longer predict, as if I ever could, how the American public will react to any of this because nobody trusts nobody about nothing.
Okay. Well, that part seems clear. And everybody is the human mind is wired, I think. I keep reading to find connections, even where there really aren't any. And that's kind of why we love conspiracy theories. Well,
Right.
theories.
So let me just read you a couple of headlines from the New York Times while we're on this topic. Officials trying to determine if New Orleans suspect had ties to terrorist groups. U.S. officials have warned that the conflict in Gaza and Lebanon could spill into the United States. What connection does this have to Gaza and Lebanon? I have no idea. Why even bring that up?
Only just, general. Well, the
In
general
general,
misunderstanding that, anything having to do with the Middle East must have to do with anytime a Muslim person does something. There are Muslims all over the world, many of whom have never been to the Middle East.
And whereas we mentioned Gaza,
that's
and
why it has
Lebanon,
nothing to do with
and
it.
we do it again in the body of the piece. We go
Yeah.
on to say authorities have voiced particular concern about the Islamic State affiliate in Afghanistan
Oh.
because this particular group has carried out deadly bombings in Iran and Russia, and 8 Tajik men were detained last year after crossing the southwestern U.S. border when authorities learned they might have ties to the Islamic State. And
Which
I'm
state?
looking and saying, so what's the connection with Gaza and Lebanon? I mean, you can claim that that's your reason, yada,
Those are
yada, yada. But,
states,
I mean, there's no
and they
direct.
have Islamic people in them. I guess. I don't really know. But, yeah, everything. The American conception of the Middle East is that's where there's a problem involving Muslims.
Right.
Okay.
And I'm not saying it to give people ideas because they've thought of this way before I have.
Yeah.
But, it's not a big jump to go from that to, okay, so the protesters must be un-American, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that's why I'm so concerned about labeling things and understanding where things came from and such. That is not a road you want to go down. And how do you not go down it?
Well, also sometimes people who find themselves motivated to pull off an attack like that sometimes will throw some mention of some hotspot like that into their writings or manifesto, not because not because they've really given it any thought, but they thought maybe other people will think this is okay if I throw this in there.
If you pick it up, then you get publicity, and then other people talk about it, and the news media reports it, and that's what we wanted. I wanted people to pay attention to me, and if you happen to be mentally unstable anyway, that helps.
I don't think ISIS really is an issue in Gaza in any way, shape, or form that I've known about.
I'm saying I at the moment
and they have a flag.
Not only skeptical, I sort of resent bringing it into it at all in the report unless you have some reason to.
All right. Well, that's good critical reading of the piece.
Anyway, here's another, again, from the New York Times headlines. Live updated an hour ago. Investigators look into whether the New Orleans attacker acted alone. Here's another thing in terms of conspiracy theories and not trusting anybody.
All right.
And not trusting the New Orleans police. Why do you think he didn't act alone? Because his actions match things that other people did in other places. And it seems to be very sophisticated.
But they have a theory
in other
about
words,
that.
To not just drive a truck spontaneously into people, but also to have a gun and also to have an ISIS flag.
Well, that's interesting.
Seems complicated. And therefore, if it's complicated, he must
I guess. Is that complex? It's complex to the people who are like, why should we have barriers on New Year's Eve? I guess that is over their heads.
I'm looking at it and I'm scratching my head and saying, I'm trying to understand the chain of logic here, but it's like escaping me.
I don't know. I mean, the ISIS flag is a bit of a question mark, but how did a person get the idea to have a giant pickup truck and an AR-15? Have you been to America, sir? Please.
None of those things have happened before.
Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and Patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We had a little conversation behind the scenes here. By the way, I figured out the connection that they need to be investigating here. Violence in Lebanon. Take a look, and we were talking about the flags. He didn't have a Lebanese flag. He had an ISIS flag. But had he been addressing the issues in Lebanon, he could have gotten himself a Lebanese flag. And that's a pine tree in the middle, and that's Alito, and he had one too, and maybe Alito pulled off these terrorist attacks. We need to bring him in here and shut this whole Supreme Court down until we can figure out what the hell's going on.
Right. I think it's work on the part of both the editors and the reporters to try to make a case that somehow or other Lebanon, Syria, or Gaza are involved
Are they?
Somehow.
An officer involved shooting?
And
Like that?
never mention Israel.
It is interesting that
You don't even mention it.
Like on three
and
sides.
Look, shouldn't mention any of it because there's no proof of anything. Here's one from the New York Times. Investigators look for links between the New Orleans attack and a Las Vegas blast.
All right.
And President Biden said they've yet to find any connection.
Right. No widespread fraud either.
That means for the moment there's no connection. Nobody's going to believe that. It's like part of I don't believe anything.
Right. Yeah. But again, the mind is wired to look for patterns even where they don't exist. They rented the cars from the same outfit. Had it been Hertz or Alamo, no one would be saying much.
So completely unrelated.
Yes.
There was a comment made about
You're kidding.
On Twitter, on social media, that I
Probably
noticed
wrong.
that it came from a story about how rural people will often drive for a while
Yeah.
in order to buy
I saw
bread.
that one. Right. That was in the semaphore year-end who's wrong about what compendium.
As
We
if
mentioned it
like,
the other day.
That's bad and you should look down on that and they're stupid and why are they doing this? But my friend Natalie Jackson, who grew up in a very rural area in Texas, points out these are often food deserts just like urban areas can be.
Okay.
And so the only bread that's being sold is like 3 times the price of somewhere. You're going to drive somewhere else to get stuff.
Yes,
Because
it may not be
people don't have a lot
only
of money.
bread that
and
you're
so
going
there's no
for.
reason. And by the way, they're going to buy other things. They'll make it a provisional
that's the
stop
issue.
for a whole bunch of other things. And so there's no reason to look down on folks when they do that. Well, why does that come to mind? Well, let me make the connection here because humans are always trying to make connections. So
I heard that somewhere.
the New York Times says local and federal law enforcement officials are trying to determine if the man who drove a truck into a crowd in the French Quarter just after 3 a.m. on Wednesday and the man who rented the Tesla that exploded in Nevada are connected beyond superficial similarities. Both men chose soft targets on New Year's Day.
Easy.
Both rented trucks through the same budget car rental app.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the point is, everybody wants to save a buck.
Right.
How is that nefarious in any way, shape, or form? How does that connect people? I mean, people will drive a while to buy bread at a cheaper price if the regular price you're being offered is way too much. If Avis or Hertz or whoever, jacks up the price, or
Avis wouldn't do that.
Whatever, compared to what you can get on a budget car rental, you're going to take the budget.
That's probably true, and that's probably why budget car rental is named budget car rental.
And so, all right, so there'll be, I'm not that interested in whether or not there are scratches on the car before I drive off with it, because I promise you, not an issue.
Right. Yeah. You don't want to sign. You got to sign this waiver. Fine, I'll sign it. You don't want to inspect the car? No. I'm in a rush.
I'll take it.
Yeah. I mean, true. I understand. I saw that thing about the driving, and it was probably a pretty incomplete explanation of what was going on, which is what caught everybody's attention. Was they were talking about the number of people who would, I guess, since they limited it to talking about bread, would drive a 2-hour round trip to save $2 on bread. And I guess everybody else who's been doing any driving lately would realize, you just spent $8 in gas to get $2 off on bread. But my guess is if you're driving 2 hours round trip, you're probably, when I brought that up at home, that was the response. Yeah, probably not just for bread. Maybe also everything else on the list. Yeah,
I mean,
that does make sense.
I have gone to the grocery store locally here.
Yeah.
And gotten more than just bread.
You also have done this? Now, wait a second. Where were you on the night of...
Man doth not live by bread alone, but by everything that's in the store that you need.
Yeah. All right.
Like
well,
you go with
now you're a suspect.
What we old-timers used to call a shopping list.
Right. Now, I have...
Like
admittedly,
you never even go to the store without having a shopping list.
Right.
And there's 2 reasons for that. One is you don't want to binge buy, stuff that you saw on the shelf because it has a pretty box.
The list does not prevent that for me.
But you also don't want to forget the stuff you were sent originally to the store to get. Oh, and that's what the list is for.
And ironically, a list does not prevent that for me either. This is a conspiracy theory. Aha.
I told you. This
Surface
is old-time
generalities.
thinking. Like, it's not like it works. I need an app for that because a list ain't doing it. You know?
Right. And I don't rent cars I don't go to a rental car place.
You go to the
an
checkout
app.
place where you check out by yourself, by the way, with scanning.
That's
and
true.
like that.
I do go there a lot.
And then, but since it's all electronic and computer, you have to plug your app in, and the station has to say to you, "That's not on your list. You can't have it."
I need that
That's
app.
the only thing that would prevent you from doing stuff like that.
Right. The other thing that's supposed to prevent me is that they say if you're going to the self-checkout, please, 10 items or less. Well, I didn't pay any attention to what's written on this piece of paper. Why should I pay any attention to what's written on your sign? And so I break that rule and I buy the wrong things. But one thing I guess I've not seen is are you going to the grocery store with an ISIS flag? If you are, I think then we have a connection. Maybe. Because I'm doing it too.
The New York Times goes on to say, officials emphasize there's no reason to believe the two episodes are connected despite Mr. Biden's comments. Mr. Biden's comments, which were, there's no reason to think that they're connected, but we're checking it out.
What? That's outrageous. But
that was the comment.
Oh, yeah. Well, despite that comment. But the comment was
checking it out. There's no reason to believe the two episodes are connected. Well, that's exactly what Biden said.
Yeah. Whereas, that's just great. Well, Trump gets it right every time, we think, somehow, for some reason. They didn't say that, but wow. Well, golly, why say anything?
The reporting here just, it drives you nuts. It's just like, yes, Mr. Trump. Yes, Mr. Trump. Oh, yeah. Biden. We probably forgot what he was going to say.
Yeah, he's so senile. He said the right thing.
But they go on to say, they have yet to nail down key details of the Las Vegas blast, including whether the badly burned body recovered from the Cybertruck matches the man who rented the vehicle.
Okay. He wasn't burnt when he rented.
One person was killed and at least 7 people injured, but minor injuries, I'm told, after the Tesla packed with fireworks and gas canisters exploded outside an entrance. Obviously an accident.
That reminds me. Did you see that Elon Musk and some other Yahoo that
it wasn't the Tesla that blew up. It was the stuff in the Tesla that blew up.
Well, they were saying had it not been a super tough, hard to damage Cybertruck, the damage to the building and people around would have been much worse. But we've built them like a truck, like a tank. So
because it's a Trump International Hotel and nobody stays there. But
right.
The point is that the Tesla took a licking but kept on ticking till it didn't.
Right, it didn't tick. But that and of course the other issue is we keep seeing videos of there are multiple Tesla fires all the time, and apparently the statistics are such that it's not particularly significant, but of course, if there's a picture every time, and of course, putting out a fire in a battery-driven car is apparently a very different thing than a gas-powered car, and people are having tremendous difficulty with that. The widespread fame of the fires,
explosion, that's
almost full of gas cans. That too didn't help anything. And Justice was saying, by the way, you can't tell the difference between a vehicle spontaneously exploding or if it's a car bomb, you might be looking at a Tesla. Which I know Elon Musk resents very, apparently he's now, like Trump, there's a similarity here. I theorize that they're the same person.
There's no self-driving involved, so don't even go there.
But he wants to sue, or he's got in his head now he can sue the newspapers for correctly reporting that it was a Tesla that exploded because it makes it look like the Tesla was what exploded.
So here's another, because
there was an explosion in it.
In the old days, you'd give the reporter the benefit of the doubt and said, if your mother says you love her, get a second opinion, that sort of thing, get a second source. However, nobody trusts reporters either. So when they write, at a news conference, Sheriff Kevin McMahill of the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department said the authorities believe this to be an isolated incident.
Okay.
But have not yet ruled out a connection. You see?
Yeah.
You see the connection? You see that?
Despite his comments, by the way.
Despite his comments, people.
Yeah. Well, look, I don't know. Now you have people say regular police procedural jargon now has everybody, worried about it. Okay. Well, we'll see whether there's anything, I guess.
So the Tesla was rented in Colorado using Turo, an app that matches private car owners with renters.
It's Uber, but no driver.
Right, Uber, but you drive.
That's probably the best way. They should have called it, what's this Uber backwards? Rebu or something.
And so using Rebu, you could actually trace, where the car came from. The authorities were also able to trace the vehicle back to Colorado using video footage captured at charging stations.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
The sheriff thought it was simply a coincidence that both men used this app.
I'm sure.
Toro officials said they didn't believe the renter of either truck had a criminal background.
I mean, I guess that's an issue, is for people who are renting their car out this way probably need to think twice about, is the app doing anything to find out that I'm not renting to a criminal who's going to blow up my car?
Yeah.
No? Okay. Well, but yeah, that's essentially it, right? It's the Uber concept. You have the car, why not put it to work? Well, I can't drive around all day. Well, why not let somebody else drive around?
Have somebody else drive it.
Okay.
Because, why wouldn't you trust somebody with your car?
Right.
Complete stranger.
Sure. Well, you do it with your house on Airbnb. It's Airbnb for cars. Yeah. Yes. All right. But the cars are so much harder to bring to, or the houses are harder to bring to New Orleans.
I'm a different generation. I just don't get any of this stuff. But
yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah. It's it's interesting. Maybe a bad trend, just the whole commodification of what are supposed to be your prized personal possessions. Maybe there's something wrong with the economy on that level. Everybody has to rent out their house and their car. You're never finished paying for it. You never own it, and you never even have it around for your use because you're renting it to other people.
And they won't sell it to me.
Right.
So why not give it to somebody else? What's the difference?
Right. And now I need an app that will match people who are thinking of torching their cars for insurance purposes with people who want to use them in attacks, and that's the efficiency I'm achieving in the market. I'm a billionaire. I'm dangerous and for trusted, but might be president.
All right. Well, I'm going to change topics for a few minutes.
Is there another one?
Well, I want to talk about the legacy of James Earl Carter from Plains, Georgia.
Right. Okay. There's no connection between him and these attacks, despite what Greg is going to tell you. But
well, he's worked on Middle East issues, so therefore, obviously,
I don't trust anybody. Okay.
No, he died before it happened, so that doesn't prove anything.
Right. Okay.
Jimmy Carter had I think, fairly described controversial presidency. Many people don't give him credit for much good that happened.
Right.
Despite handshakes
between
Sadat and Begin. And other things that happened in that era. But that was a long time ago, and things have happened since then.
Yes, and Biden is at Camp David. Aha.
He was the best ever.
Yes.
And people often think of Habitat for Humanity and him building houses.
I do think of that.
Carrying himself with dignity. He didn't always get along with all the other ex-presidents because he spoke his mind, and they didn't like that.
I see.
He was perfectly happy to be critical of what he thought they were doing when they were being hypocrites.
All right.
But he also worked on something else besides the Habitat for Humanity thing, which is part of who he was.
Mm-hmm.
Carter Center worked on public health issues around the world, and one of the main ones they worked on is eliminating a parasite in Africa and other places called guinea worm.
Okay. Worse than guinea pig is the guinea worm.
Guinea worm is it's not a horrible, terrible, bad disease in that it kills you. It's a horrible, terrible, bad disease is that it's gross and hurts you. I mean, it hurts. You recover, but it hurts. So what happens is you drink contaminated water. I
don't recommend this, but this is how you would do it.
Well, that's exactly how you stop it from happening. You don't recommend it. You get rid of the practice of drinking contaminated water.
Raw water, as the health nuts are now calling it.
So,
great.
And they sell it because it's much better for you than pasteurized water.
So if you're still wondering how RFK has a worm in his brain, it's not a guinea worm.
So what you do is you swallow the contaminated water where the larvae of the guinea worm are. They mate in your body, migrate to your feet, and then break their way out through blisters.
Not Like
There's
aliens.
no cure in the sense of medicines. There's no prevention in the sense of vaccines.
No.
The way you prevent it is you stop people from drinking contaminated water, and this is what the Carter Center has worked on.
Okay.
So, since 1986, the Carter Center writes, the Carter Center has led the international campaign to eradicate guinea worm disease, working closely with ministries of health and local communities, U.S. Center for Disease Control, WHO, UNICEF, and many others.
Well, they're all bad now.
Guinea worm disease could become the second human disease in history after smallpox to be eradicated.
Tremendous.
It would be the first parasitic disease to be eradicated and the first disease to be eradicated without the use of vaccine or medicine.
Oh. Huh.
How widespread? In 1986, the disease afflicted an estimated 3.5 million people a year in 21 countries in Africa and Asia. Today, thanks to the work of the Carter Center and its partners, inspired and pushed by Jimmy Carter, and including the countries themselves which did the work, the incidence of guinea worm has been reduced by 99.99%. There are 14 provisional human cases in 2023. Wow. That's astounding.
Yeah, and all they had to do was clean up the water. They've had thousands of years and unable to do it. You need help and support and guidance and funding and education, and that's a tremendous undertaking. Wow.
Now, if you happen to be an animal lover, guinea worm infections in animals is a thing too.
Yeah.
Chad reduced dog guinea worm infections by 22%. And they're down to like 400 some odd animals, Mali with 47 animals. I mean, they're working on that too. There's no known curative medicine.
Yeah.
The same treatment for emerging worms has been used for thousands of years. I won't describe it.
No, please.
But the traditional removal of a guinea worm is painful, and it's wiping out this ancient disease mainly through community-based intervention to educate and change behavior, such as teaching people to filter their drinking water and prevent transmission by keeping anybody with an emerging worm, don't go into the water. Don't bathe your foot because it hurts. That just releases larvae. That's the kind of thing you have to teach.
Yeesh.
But the point is, it's working.
Good.
And this is one of the major legacies of Jimmy Carter that people don't focus on. They just think about, he wasn't a great president, put on a sweater and he told us to turn the heat down and he lost to Ronald Reagan, who was a great president because he won twice. And any president who wins twice is by definition a great president.
Oh, don't tell Trump that. You have to win twice in a row.
Yeah, exactly.
Grover Cleveland, not
great. He'll try to do that now.
Yeah.
Win twice in a row.
Yeah, he may just to prove. Well, the country wants an opportunity to prove that I'm great.
Right.
So, I guess that's an interesting story.
So this is from the PBS NewsHour. That was in the Carter Center.
Thank God.
From the PBS NewsHour. Jimmy Carter's work promoting global public health remembered as core piece of his legacy. That, along with Habitat for Humanity, it just things that he did that made him a great ex-president.
Yes.
Bill Clinton wasn't bad. He went around the world trying to fix things.
Yes,
as an ambassador,
with a different approach.
So he had a pretty good record as an ex-president, but Jimmy Carter was better than any of them.
Yeah, pretty good. And both the housing thing and
he also
the
used to
disease
go around
thing
checking on elections. I mean, he was just a fantastic ex-president.
Yeah, right. Election monitor around the world.
And here's part of the lesson, Again, reporters are trying to make the case that, in many ways, Joe Biden is like Jimmy Carter. Well, no, only to you, because humans try to make connections. But here is one connection.
All right.
Okay. Jimmy Carter was the exact opposite of Joe Biden in a very important way.
Therefore, a connection. Yeah, all right.
There is a connection.
All right.
A backwards connection there. Biden was the quintessential insider Washington, D.C. creature.
All right.
Although he went home every night on the train.
Okay. That's not quintessential.
Or whatever.
Right?
Carter was a total quintessential outsider. Yeah. Hated Washington, couldn't stand Washington, never got along with Washington, never learned the ways of Washington. And one of the reasons he had such a difficult first presidency is reporters felt that about him as well. He didn't like them. They didn't like him. There was the connection with Joe Biden. They may both be, opposite in regard to how they felt about D.C., but I think they both agree they couldn't stand the press, and the press couldn't stand them, and that's the way they get written about. And so part of the legacy for Jimmy Carter and for Joe Biden, unfortunately, is that the people who buy ink by the barrel are the ones who are writing the legacy stories.
Yeah, and I see how they do it, and I guess that is pretty interesting. I'm now thinking about even since Bill Clinton was mentioned earlier. Now I'm reminded of it. Was it David Broder who's what was it? Broder was the one who did the
he's not art. He
didn't even. It's not their place, right? They came and wrecked the place, and it's
place.
Yeah. I mean,
was David Broder.
That was about Clinton, and I'm just thinking about how
dare he? I mean, this is our place, and how dare he disturb how we do things here?
And I mean, George W.
Carter
Bush had
worse.
no Washington insider. His father was president, certainly, but I mean, he went out of his way to pretend he hated Washington. I'm going to go clear brush rather than stick around here on the weekends, and yet I don't know. Well, he's a heroic figure, mission accomplished. He kept us safe when he hadn't kept us safe, which came up earlier, right? How was Trump going to say he kept us safe? Well, just say he kept us safe like George W. Bush did. Washington sniper didn't happen. The 9/11 attack didn't happen. He kept us safe except for the things that were unsafe. Yes.
Right. So anyway, I just wanted to point that out. So
that is an interesting connection.
Goes part of. I'm very skeptical of reporters writing about these particular presidents. Judy Woodruff or other people who have devoted time to write books about them is one thing. But the general approach of here's the obit that we had all ready to go and sat there on the shelf for months with Carter because he was in hospice. What kind of angles are you trying to do? And if you're not talking about his public health legacy and Habitat for Humanity, you're really not talking about Jimmy Carter is all I'm saying.
Yeah, and I don't think I saw a quality obituary that didn't mention them, but there were people who took to social media that did even less work on their obituary because they only had 30 seconds to write the thing. And I remember being in line for gas, so screw that guy. Well,
exactly
that's
right.
Not...
So, and remember the hostages?
Well, we remember. That was a big topic.
I remember Iran-Contra, too.
Earlier
this month,
this week.
Yeah, well, that's my point.
Yeah. That's pretty incredible erasure all by itself. And, of course, who gets to be the great president? The one who said, you know what would be really good for me politically? Treason. I'll talk to Iran and make sure that those Americans suffer for longer so that I can be a great president.
Okay, so here's some semi-breaking interesting news about the topic we originally started the show with.
What did we talk about?
New Orleans attack suspects' divorce filings point to financial difficulties. The man suspected of carrying out, this is ABC News, the man suspected of carrying out New Year's attack in New Orleans had a checkered marital history punctuated by multiple divorces and financial difficulty. So, troubled people with troubled pasts
things.
Having involvement in mass killings.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that in fact has happened.
I don't know. That's going to tell us much of anything.
Well, Aaron Ashton points out nobody's ever satisfied by that kind of explanation, but they're almost always essential drivers to self-radicalization. The person had deep personal issues, sought some outlet to express rage. Radical ideology just is an outlet.
That's something I have something
problem.
on that. Yes, and I think I put away in pocket some things I saw that I don't think they were even offered in connection with these attacks, but just generally, I think they were actually offered in connection with Elon Musk, which is interesting, how people spiral downwards and end up in a right-wing conspiracy theory, in particular right-wing conspiracy theory feedback loop that drives them to become more and more radicalized. We can get to that. I can discuss that. It's the algorithm, man. It kind of, I mean, it is. And it includes the organic internal algorithm of I love any kind of theory that will connect this stuff. But generally, I guess, long story short on that one is, as you dabble in this stuff more and more and talk to more and more people in your social circles about it and alienate yourselves from them by insisting on craziness, you retreat more and more into the place where you have your priors confirmed, and then they feed you worse and worse stuff until you break your connections with the people who were telling you, don't listen to that, it's crazy, and listen only to the people who say, have more crazy.
Yeah. So Aaron Astor goes and makes two other comments. This is on Twitter that I thought was interesting.
Yes.
The ideologies and the organizations that promote them, of course, are very real. They need to be confronted. But the lone shock troop almost always ends up being some kind of personal loser who's already suicidal and wants to bathe his self-loathing in some demented glory. And it's also the case that various people will play up or play down these personal issues, depending upon their own political biases and the incident in question. We saw that with Donald Trump, who said something about, you see, everything I told you about immigrants was true. The guy was born in Texas.
Yeah, but who cares? Yeah.
Right, exactly. That's probably why these explanations are never satisfying. They're usually given selectively, but, they're still true. So it's just, it makes you skeptical of everything that you read. Like, what else is going on here? Why now? Why? Yes, it's New Year's Eve, but why this New Year's Eve? What's going? Well, a guy just had a fight with his wife. Okay, well, that's not the reason he did it, but it may have been the match.
Yes.
I don't understand why there was such a big fire, and I don't understand why there was so much fuel. But if you're telling me that was the match, okay, maybe.
Yes. I guess. And the conspiracy theorists also elsewhere that will find other weird explanations for it, even when it has nothing to do with it.
Just, wait a little, be patient, try to find out the whole story, and don't use it for political purpose.
Right.
And nobody will pay any attention to those caveats.
Yeah. But they'll be united in not paying attention to it. And so what's her name is right the whole time, I guess. Why this New Year's Eve? Yeah, could be anything. Could be a message to Trump. Could be the fact that 2025 apparently is a perfect square, by the way. 45 times 45.
Yes.
And 45, that's Donald Trump, QAnon, and then, you could put anything together, as it turns out. So, all right. Well, that was a hell of a roundup. Maybe tomorrow or next week things will be less explodey. And we'll be able to concentrate on more, I suppose, normal news.
Yeah, well, listen, if you're going down that route, let me just tell you, the last time we had a perfect square year was 1936. That's 44 times 44.
And nothing unusual was going on in 1936, I'm sure. At the Olympics, there was a guy
1849
who had a weird mustache.
So
okay.
That just proves my point.
1849,
well,
California
we'll
Gold
talk
Rush.
About that next week.
Okay, just put them all together. You can see it: California Gold Rush, Berlin Olympics, attacks in New Orleans. It's clear the connections are everywhere. I don't know what they are, but if there was an ISIS flag at any of the other two, you're onto something. That's all I can tell you. All right, thanks, Greg. We will round out the week and catch up with you again on Monday.
Yep.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. One programming note, I guess, commentary as things are going on live here on the live stream, Mighty OCD. I guess can't help but listen live because of the OCD. So welcome, and commenting here, a note on the Carter legacy, which I guess we didn't discuss when we were specifically talking Carter legacy because he wanted to focus on the public health aspects of it. But we did make mention, I know, somewhere along the line, the note here is, all those things and the Camp David Accords, yes, that's true. And I think that kind of you shouldn't really make it as passing mention, of course, of the Camp David Accords. But Camp David came up. I know I mentioned that, offhandedly joking that Joe Biden is at Camp David right now, I understand. And so therefore somehow conspiracy theory. But that was the reference to the handshake between Anwar Sadat and Menachem Begin, though we didn't give the first names. Sadat and Begin, that happened as a result of the Camp David Accords. And did they not sign? I guess they did. The handshake must have taken place at Camp David, I guess, right? Or did they do the signing ceremony at the White House? I don't remember the content of the photos. But certainly, a major accomplishment. And by the way, I don't know that there's any other president that has ever achieved something as significant in what would probably be in the top 5 list all time had you surveyed Americans over the past 50 years, like what's an intractable problem that you'd like to see the United States government address, or if you were writing up questions for any presidential debate in the last 50 plus years, there's got to be a question about what? Middle East issues and the Arab-Israeli conflict, as they used to call it in old days, Middle Eastern conflict as it became known. I don't really know what someone could trace the evolution of the terminology and all that, but certainly true and certainly deserving of, I guess if we were going to spend, and he deserved every minute of the time we spent on the public health record, but multiply that times 100 is how much a real expert probably should be spending on talking about the Camp David Accords and related issues. So, but good note and well worth calling out a second time because, come on. Yeah, and I guess it highlights just how ridiculous it is that Twitter, apparently, and I haven't seen it on Blue Sky, so thank God. I think I just like the quality of Blue Sky a lot better in these terms. But Twitter very quickly went to right-wing lunatic commentary bashing Carter and the Camp David Accords. No credit given for it, and it was all terrible anyway for reasons, and no one knows what the reasons are. But on the sane side of the ledger, you make mention of things like that. So I also mentioned that I had seen also on Blue Sky, and I was very happy to note that I wasn't seeing all the same garbage yesterday. One thing I noticed, the most obvious sign that I was not involved in any way in Twitter discourse and that was getting all my social media news via Blue Sky, was that I realized, hey, I don't know whether maybe the recent victory in the election and for the Republicans and anticipation of a second Trump term have got them feeling better, about themselves, such that they don't need to do things like see the attack in New Orleans and immediately say, this is a Middle Eastern terrorist. Though clearly the guy gave them every opportunity to make that accusation later, but before they had seen anything about the supposed connection and maybe the presence of an ISIS flag, they were, every terrorist attack, every horrific attack, they immediately jump out and say, this is going to be connected to international Islamic terrorism, whether it is or isn't. I'm sure they said if it was an attack, it was the same thing at the Trump Hotel in Las Vegas, but no, that turned out to be apparently an American suspect, according to the sources that are saying that there's a suspect named at all. And apparently there's some discrepancy there. But I realized, I think, because I'm just not participating in Twitter, I didn't see it. And I thought, well, I doubt very much that they've cured themselves because they're feeling good about things and don't need to engage in that kind of scapegoating anymore. I just imagine it's happening at the same volume as ever, but I don't have to see it. And yet I know what's going on in the news. This is actually a very good solution for me, having migrated to Blue Sky. So, I mean, I guess it wouldn't help if I viewed my job as monitoring what the lunatics are up to minute to minute. But I don't know that I could make that my job. It would be too difficult to live that way, the way things are on Twitter now. All right, let's see. I mentioned that I had seen on Blue Sky some good theorizing about the nature of these sorts of spirals. And so there's, let's see, at least one. And is the other one? I have two unidentified Blue Sky pocket entries. All right. The first one I opened is the one I'm thinking of. And now I got to go see whether there's a relationship between the two. There isn't. Well, yes, there is, now that I think about it. And it's not hard to see what the connection is. Now I got you. Something I wanted to tell you, I guess we'll start this way. Something to update you on the bad news about just how bad Elon Musk is and has gotten. Something I missed entirely. because I'm not. Here's the downside of not participating in Twitter: is you don't notice these things. However, luckily somebody pays the good people at various news outlets like the BBC, and I'm sure others, but this one happens to refer to a BBC article about what Elon Musk, what has he done now? And the answer, probably old news on the internets, because we move minute to minute there. Elon Musk, I don't know whether he has done it on a sustained basis, but he did it for long enough for newspaper reporters to notice, changed his screen name for his Twitter account, which, is something you can do offhandedly, and so therefore might mean nothing, but we're always trying to find deep meaning in everything. You can do it in 10 seconds. He could have undone it. People, I have never seen, for instance, a newspaper article about, oh my God, somebody important changed their Twitter screen name to something Halloween themed during the month of October. Right. It doesn't tell us very much. Does this tell us anything besides he's trolling people and likes to rile them up? I don't know. Maybe. There is the added problem of his being, one, wildly crazy, and more wildly crazy than most people. I mean, I just think that that's true. Two, even if there are other people more wildly crazy, they don't have billions upon billions upon billions, hundreds of billions of dollars to manifest that crazy in the real world. And three, almost none of the people who even have that ability have managed to capture and purchase a president of the United States. So there's an issue. What's going on? Elon Musk changes his name to, and I don't know how I'm pronouncing this, Kekius, Kekius, Kekius Maximus on X. Now, without any explanation, you would just say either, well, who cares? People change their names all the time. Or, okay, but I don't even know what the hell that is because normies won't know. And that's the hint that there's something going on here. This is something normies won't know about. Does anybody care that normies don't know? You don't bring that up unless there's a theme. So what's happening here? Tom Bailey, spelled B-A-Y-L-Y, and Patrick Johnson, reporting here for the BBC News, explained to us what's going on. And on social media, Seth Kotler explaining what the explanation means to the rest of us. We'll start with the BBC. The world's richest man, Elon Musk, has sparked speculation after changing his name on his social media platform. It's called X. Remember, the name change there didn't mean very much. But he's changed his name to Kekius Maximus. Now, the tech mogul and close confidant of U.S. President-elect Donald Trump offered no immediate explanation for the name or his new profile image, which depicts the character Pepe the Frog, which those of you who have been listening to the show for long enough will remember, and many people who have nothing whatsoever to do with the show already know and remember the Pepe the Frog thing being a meme that has been used by far-right groups. That's certainly general enough a description that you can't argue. The move has sent ripples through the cryptocurrency world. I wouldn't have imagined that would be the first place you'd turn for the ripples, but sending the value of a meme coin, a digital currency inspired by internet memes, that shares the same name, skyrocketing. Is the name Kekius Maximus the name of the coin, or do I misunderstand things? Anyway, in the past, Mr. Musk has influenced crypto prices with his social media commentary, but it was not immediately clear if he had any involvement in this particular meme coin. Sometimes he does, sometimes he doesn't. But sometimes, I don't know. He seems to enjoy doing things like that and then sending the value of certain meme coins through the roof. And even when he doesn't own it, I mean, I guess, you have to wonder with a guy who's so motivated by money, does someone in his family or a friend of his own it? And can you convince someone like Elon Musk, either for money or favors or just asking if you happen to be close to him? Hey, if I could get you for 5 seconds to do something related to one of these meme coins on X with all your followers, they'll all think of it as a sign to buy the meme coin and they'll go buy it and I'll make $1 billion. Will you do that for me? I don't know whether that's what's going on, but it certainly seems like it might be the case. And there's another story as to why that's the case. But let's get through this one first. As they mentioned right here in this story, in the past, this is something that Elon Musk has done in the past. Then they show with a screenshot of his new screen name, there it is, Kekius, appears to be a Latinization, with the IUS, of kek, which is K-E-K, a word roughly equivalent to laugh out loud, popularized by gamers, but now often associated with the alt-right. I don't know why. I don't know whether that's just... I don't know the origin of how that connection is made, but maybe that's cackling in a way, like kek, 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 I got no idea. But they use it, and that's a thing. So apparently used by gamers, but now often associated with the alt-right. Kek is also the name of the ancient Egyptian god of darkness, is that right? Who is sometimes depicted with the head of a frog. This may or may not have anything to do with anything. And the people who, started using Kek may have had no knowledge of that, I don't know, but now it's the sort of thing that you put together and either laugh at or truly believe, or both. Many people would link Maximus to the name of Russell Crowe's heroic character. I mean, all right. In the film Gladiator, Maximus Decimus Meridius. I think nobody remembers the rest of his name. Mr. Musk's new profile image depicts Pepe, the frog, in Roman military dress, holding what appears to be a game console. Is that right? I guess so, looking at it. I don't know if there's really anything more to it. It looks like that might be the end of the BBC explanation. So as I mentioned, this kind of found its way into my timeline via Seth Kotler, who is a U.S. history, says teaches U.S. history. I assume that means you're a professor or associate professor or whatever terminology they're using, but maybe not. I don't know. Sorry, Seth, but teaches history at Willamette University, which I do know how to pronounce, thanks to one of the best mnemonics I've ever heard, and I think Joan handed me that one, right? If you can't remember how to say it, you know it already. You probably remember, too. It's Willamette, damn it, even though it looks like you might want to pronounce it as Willamette, which I'm sure I did first. But Willamette, and guess what? He's working on a book about the long history of the U.S. right, and he picks up on this BBC News article and says the Keck reference is very 2017. Like, he's not exactly on top of the hottest topics in the world here, but the Keck reference is very 2017 alt-right thing. The person who pushed it into the discourse that year was Sargon of Akkad. I mean, we're dealing with dumb screen names here, and I've got a dumb one too, but it does tend to make everything look dumber when you're explaining these things. And when you find yourself explaining, well, the reason that this Medicare policy was put into place, you see, is Cat Turd 2 once said, oh boy, I can't believe I have to say this, but it does make me think back like 20, not quite 20 years, I don't know, 15 years ago, working under the dumb screen names and posting things at places like Daily Kos and having the discussion, hey, if we want to actually have this material be taken seriously, maybe we got to think about posting with more realistic names, if not your actual real name necessarily. But yeah, if you want to inject this thinking into the mainstream, right? Somebody's going to have to write about this at some point. Where did this come from? And do you want it to be attributed to Cat Turd 1 at that point? No. You don't. And it was interesting. I think part of the discussion was, when these things do make it into the mainstream press, they tend not to credit bloggers with having developed this line of thinking or this theory or this policy. And maybe it's because they don't know what to do with the fact that they have to credit it to Cat Turd or whatever your dumb screen name is. And maybe they would be more willing to attach your name to it if your name was something more like what they're used to dealing with. Although, as it turns out, I guess the discovery in the end of all that was, no, they just don't want to credit anybody but themselves. So they very rarely do. And some journalists much better with it, of course, than others. Anyway, so here we have this having been introduced into the discourse, this Keck thing in 2017 by Sargon of Akkad, a British fascist who cut his teeth during Gamergate. His account was banned from Twitter in 2019, but then reinstated by Musk in 2022 when he bought it. Seth goes on to say the Pepe Keck name that Musk has adopted is a nostalgic shout-out to the alt-right culture of 2016 and 17 that formed around Trump. Many of the innovators of those symbols, intended to be both an identifier of their fascist politics and also, quote, just a fun meme, unquote, to trigger the libs, are now high up in MAGA world. If you do a Twitter search for the word Keck, and Jack Posobiec's account, you remember, I don't know how he never really figured out how he pronounced his name, but you know the guy. If you search for his account and Keck, for example, you'll find hundreds of times since 2020 that he's tweeted out just the word Keck over some story that is good news for Trump. Posobiec was a D-list right-wing influencer in 2016 with maybe 40,000 followers on Twitter. Today, he has about 2 million. And he was in fact, in Trump's war room during the debate, this wackadoodle Posobiec. And his fascist book was blurbed by J.D. Vance and Don Jr., establishing further, and maybe for all time, the connection between those two. Jack Posobiec is a very influential MAGA media figure. He posted this today. It wasn't today. This is an old now. This is still a Seth Kotler thread, but he's now included in it for reference about Posobiec, a 5-month-old post on Blue Sky when he was talking about this subject last. So it was 5 months ago that he posted this. In the 1930s, Father Dennis Fahey was probably the most well-known for being one of the most outspoken anti-Semites in the world. Quite an accomplishment in that era, the 1930s. And Posobiec's post from 5 months ago was a picture of Father Fahey, and it says here, God wants one religion and many nations. The devil many religions. Oh, I see. The devil wants many religions and one nation. Okay, so that's his sort of America first-ish sort of approach thing. One religion, mine, and many nations. Like, in other words, you brown people stay in your countries, and but worship in our religion. The devil wants many religions and one nation. So a direct attack on the idea of a multicultural democracy, for instance. Seth's original thread then goes on. It is indeed kind of pathetic that a grown man, allegedly, like Musk, has adopted such a 4chan-flavored retro-fascist name for himself on Twitter, but it's more meaningful than just that. Of course, because he's the richest man in the world and owns a president, but that's not stated here. Known background here. But that name is a reference to the good old days of the MAGA movement circa 2016 and 17 that are now back. And then another example from 5 months ago from Posobiec, where Seth is telling us Posobiec set off fasci alarm bells for me back in 2017 when he was just a baby MAGA influencer with 50,000 followers, and now he has 2.5 million. Some screenshots to establish that. And then Seth continues, Chris Rufo's top assistant, for example, frequently posts Pepe memes as a winking reference to his days as a Groyper college student in the late 2010s. He both means it as an identifier of his far-right McCarthyite politics and is also being playful and ironic because that reference is so 2016-17. Anyway, I wanted to emphasize, Seth says, that Musk knows full well that the Keck Pepe stuff is redolent of the simultaneously juvenile and menacing alt-right culture of 4chan circa 2017. It's intended as an inside joke among his cohort of far-right activists who are now driving the MAGA bus. The Pepe Keck stuff works for Musk because normie Republican voters and the Chamber of Commerce and earnest pro-life evangelical types in the MAGA camp won't get the reference at all, or will just wave it off as harmless silliness but the audience it's intended for will understand what it means. It's a stand back and stand by, as opposed to stand down message. Anyway, here's a Keck explainer from May of 2017, when it had recently become a prominent element of the far-right landscape, coming from the Southern Poverty Law Center, in case you were interested in that explainer, entitled, What the Keck? Explaining the alt-right deity behind their meme magic. Seth then goes on to say, this seems like the most plausible explanation for the timing of this. It's Musk trying to do fan service for a segment of the MAGA coalition that he has temporarily alienated by not being racist enough on immigration for their tastes. Here he's referring to the comment of Matt Salomone. Is that how you would pronounce Salomone? An associate dean at the Bartlett College of Science and Math, Bridgewater State University. Okay. Who makes the observation that the Keck thing, he says, is a shibboleth. Is that how you pronounce the word? At a convenient time, too, since after the H-1B flap, he needed something to reassure the MAGA chuds that he's still one of them. Very interesting. And other commenters take it from there. But I think that might be the end of Seth's discussion of the idea. So I said that there was a connection with something else that I saw via Blue Sky the other day. This time a thread from Chad Loder, community activist, cybersecurity expert in his profile here, a citizen journalist as well. And I know we've called his name a couple times in the past, and he has a slightly different approach. Well, what does this mean in general for the fact that Elon Musk is diving in? And how did this happen? And how is it, that a couple of months ago, and really only a couple of months ago, we had mainstream news reporters saying, gosh, it's difficult. I mean, it looks like he's a right-winger, Elon Musk, but it's not that simple. You can't just pin him down. You can't pigeonhole this guy. His politics are still a mystery. Of course, I think most people have probably been dissuaded of that, even in reporter circles. And then, of course, because nobody trusts anybody anymore, there's also the prevalent theory that, no, they were doing it on purpose the whole time. Depends where you stand, I guess, and how far you want to go with that theory. But here's Chad saying, Elon Musk is a good example of how terrible people become increasingly radicalized into the far right. And why is it almost always the far right? I guess simply because the far right is a community that accepts cruel, terrible people. Like, you can become a terrible person on the left, I guess. But generally speaking, up until very recently, there really wasn't a place for you to land comfortably inside the far left and be outwardly driven by an interest in perpetuating cruelty to people. They at least fancied themselves on the far left as people who wanted to combat that sort of widespread cruelty, though they've developed a landing space of their own. Anyway, yes, so Elon Musk is a great example of how terrible people become increasingly radicalized into the far right, simply because that place, the far right, is a community that accepts cruel, terrible people. It's tempting to say Elon is going mask off here. Right? He's revealing who he always was. But Chad says, I'd wager Elon didn't know who Tommy Robinson was 5 years ago. And that, of course, calls for a reminder of who Tommy Robinson actually is. And he's a British, fascist alt-right figure. Although, now as I mentioned it, I wonder whether he actually... did he at some point maintain a pseudonym online that may or may not have been involved in the injection of, like, say, the Keck terminology? Is that any reference to Tommy Robinson? I don't know where Chad brings the Tommy Robinson reference in, but he's a well-known figure, and even without there being any previous connection, it establishes a point all by itself that Elon Musk would now know who Tommy Robinson is, and that other people would have known who he was those 5 years ago, and Elon Musk might not have been among their number, but now he is. It's tempting to say that Elon's going mask off, but I'd wager Elon didn't know who Tommy Robinson was 5 years ago, and that by itself might just illustrate that Elon has changed, and that it might not be the case that he was always the exact kind of terrible person 5 years ago anyway, that he is today, that it may have evolved. It's more than mask off. Elon Musk he notes that this is an issue, grew up in a white supremacist apartheid milieu, but that's pretty clear. But I don't think, Chad says, that Elon paid much attention to fringe far-right figures, including British and German domestic white nationalist groups who he's now endorsing online, until the last few years. Elon's an example of acceleration down the pipeline. And we sort of long story shorted this earlier, but here's the way Chad put it. Elon is a deeply insecure person, and it's clear that he was not well liked by his early peers, and that may be spectrum issues, as people use a shorthand for that. Elon wants more than anything to be adored. And maybe now that he's a multi-billionaire, he thinks he can buy that, I would guess. He's destroyed the instinctive mainstream approval that society gives white men. Now Elon is desperately seeking approval wherever he can find it. When people alienate everyone in their personal lives by mistreating them, they find a welcoming community on the far right. That's how it happens.
Hi everybody, it's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Or read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's continue on. I know it was in a difficult place to break for in the middle of Chad Loader's thread here about what he thinks is going on with Elon Musk. But as he points out, he's a deeply insecure person, not well liked by his early peers. And then, of course, he ends up, I guess, the first time you spend dabbling in right-wing weirdness, or whether that's what's alienating you from people in your life, or just that in combination with your strange, whatever it is, whether it's spectrum issues or anything else, or social anxieties, etc. When you are alienating everyone in your personal life by mistreating them, those kinds of people often find a welcoming community on the far right. And sometimes it's more welcoming the more abusive you've been to people. If you think you're right in abusing all these people and alienating yourself from everybody, and everybody in your life says, no, you're wrong, you're actually being quite a jerk and we can't stand it anymore. But if somebody says, we love jerks, or you were right the whole time, or I'm crazy too, and so I believe your stupid conspiracy theory and you should be bothering your people in your life about it, that's welcoming. And, we've seen it a number of times with other figures, less wealthy and influential, perhaps, than Elon Musk. But, where you've seen people that, consider themselves to be on the left end of the spectrum, and finding, for whatever reason, they adopt some position that alienates them from everybody that they've known politically. They almost all very quickly fall into not only finding themselves welcomed on the right, but finding themselves welcomed and paid on the right. And that's another issue that's tied into the very legitimate issue of the left's unwillingness to organize and fund activism in the same way. maybe that's a good thing. Nobody should be perhaps funding that kind of destructive activism, certainly. And naturally the people on the right are saying, well, it isn't destructive, it's constructive. We're tearing down an administrative state that didn't belong in the modern era or doesn't have a right to exist in the first place. I know they think they're right in the same way that people on the left think that they're right, but they're not getting funded the same way. Anyway, good point. When people alienate everyone in their personal lives, they find a welcoming community on the far right. Thus, the far right becomes the last refuge of cruel and insecure people. Once they're welcomed in, people start imbibing the really hard ideologies like outright Nazism. We see this radicalization pipeline frequently with proto-fascist movements like QAnon. First, the proto-fascist alienates their family, then their coworkers, and then they lose their job or maybe get public scorn for, pumping these ideas back out. When they have nothing to lose, you often see them accelerate down the pipeline. Many of these people don't start out as Nazis. And of course, once they become Nazis, they say, you did it. You're the ones that drove. And then it's a constant refrain. You made me a Nazi. Or since you were calling me a Nazi anyway, I might as well be a Nazi. The slightly dumber explanation of the already pretty dumb idea that you made me a Nazi. They become Nazis through a process of self-sabotage, isolation, and then indoctrination, first through ironic humor and memes, and then progressing into outright Nazism. There's good sociological research describing how this radicalization process works, it turns out. I understand the temptation to say such and such a person has finally gone mask off. Even with his apartheid upbringing, Elon is not some kind of Manchurian Candidate-style secret Nazi who is hiding it from the world. We're watching him self-radicalize in real time. It's not unique. It's useful to understand how the radicalization process works. It's helpful to know the personality types who are most vulnerable to radicalization. I'm not a big believer in de-radicalization's effectiveness, though I respect those who do it's got its own handle, derad work. Derad usually doesn't work. It comes too late. The radicalization process is a self-reinforcing feedback loop. We'll clean this up for you. Do crappy things, alienate the people in your life who might have had moderating influence. Find a community then who adores your crappy behavior, do more crappy things, alienate more people, get more adulation from even crappier people. And sometimes, right, the adulation, there are certainly people who are so thoroughly crappy themselves, they exist only to ironically encourage self-radicalization and destruction by others who are sharing their experiences online. Wouldn't it be funny to tell them to do something even worse? Oh my God, they did it. I can't believe it. What else could we make this person do? Chad goes on to say, I've said that de-radicalization usually doesn't work. That doesn't mean it should never be tried, in case you thought that's what it meant. It's just that the statistics aren't good. Even people who do derad work say this, although I am sure that you could, justify all the work that you're doing. If even one person becomes de-radicalized, that's a good thing, and it is. Nor, Chad says, am I suggesting fascists should be coddled. Fascists need to be stopped by any means necessary. Once a person passes a certain point of radicalization, de-radicalization has a low chance of success. The focus has to shift from changing beliefs to interdicting their ability to organize, recruit, and fundraise, just making it expensive, painful, laborious, and dangerous for them to hurt people. That's an interesting approach, different slightly from what I understand the de-radicalization approach to be. But yeah, I guess it ends here, I think, or at least the comments begin spinning off into other commenters chiming in. I can't read all of them, but you might wonder, for instance, it's probably set off an alarm bell for you, right? Make it, how does he put it? Make it expensive, painful, laborious, and dangerous for them to hurt people. Right away, you probably had that alarm go off. How do you make something too expensive for Elon Musk? Yeah, that's a bit of a challenge, and I don't know if if it's a challenge that we're up to at any level. All right. Well, I thought that was a good explainer along with the BBC article and, kind of help clarify why did this happen to Elon Musk? How come it's happening to everybody? And is there anything that can be done about it? That part, I don't know. It doesn't sound like there's a lot of hope for that one. Okay. Let's see. Let's get back to Pocket for just a moment and take a look around at the other things that needed to be brought up during today's show. And we still have tomorrow. There's and beyond, of course, to try to catch up with some of these additional themes. Let's see. Right. There was the article that Scott sent me from and as it turns out, it is actually something from Threads, which, what do we have? I got diverted to another app. Scott! Don't divert me to another app, Scott. But I appreciated the contribution. It led, though, to an ABC News article just to get up to speed on what's going on with the arrest in Virginia of the guy with the pipe bombs. I didn't think that it was going to become a big story in terms of I don't know how to explain it, except it's always a big story when somebody has 150 pipe bombs at home. But usually it's a one-day thing. Like, we found the guy, he hasn't planted them anywhere, and we arrested him because he had that many. And okay, good. Call me when there's a conviction. I guess that's the next time that it checks into the news. But for some reason, this has been an obsession for a number of observers of the far right, including Marcy Wheeler and a few others, who are saying this is they're following very closely the charging documents and starting to examine these things. So clearly they see something there, and I don't yet know what it is because I haven't read it. And even when you do sometimes read what Marcy Wheeler has to say about things, and you end up with more questions in the end than you started with. But here's what's going on so that we know what's being referred to and what we know at the level at which ABC is willing to introduce it to you. You may very well find much more in reading Marcy Wheeler about this. But their headline, FBI finds 150 homemade bombs at Virginia home in one of the largest such seizures, prosecutors say. I think the one thing I picked up in passing from Marcy was, well, prosecutors tend to make the worst possible case in charging documents. And I guess what's gotten this case a lot of attention is this thing. And the largest such seizure, or a record number of explosive devices, the most the FBI has ever seen. Yes, apparently that's the case. But really, how many should you have before there's a problem, right? Okay, well, the FBI may or may not have seen more or larger improvised explosive devices, but taking that out of the pleading documents, makes you think there's something more extraordinary or a different thing that's extraordinary about this case. But I think the point was, no, they have a lot of these cases, actually. Federal agents found one of the largest stockpiles of homemade explosives that they've ever seized when they arrested a Virginia man on a firearms charge last month, according to a court filing by federal prosecutors. Investigators seized more than 150 pipe bombs and other homemade devices when they searched the home of Brad Spafford, northwest of Norfolk, or as they say locally, they kind of slur that R, Norfolk, for some reason. I don't know, it's not a particularly Virginian accented thing to do, I wouldn't have thought, but that's what I've picked up over the years. So this happened in December. The prosecutor had to, because January is only a couple days old. The prosecutors said a motion filed on Monday when it was still December. The prosecutors wrote that this is believed to be the largest seizure by number of finished explosive devices in FBI history. So that's kind of qualified all by itself. Right? The largest number of finished ones. Not Finnish ones. This is not the Finns doing this in partnership with the Estonians. But, okay, so they've seized a larger number of mostly completed ones? I don't know what that means exactly. Most of the bombs were found in a detached garage at the home in Isle of Wight County, along with tools and bomb-making materials, including fuses and pieces of plastic pipe, according to court documents. Those would be the materials. The prosecutors also wrote, several additional apparent pipe bombs were found in a backpack in the home's bedroom, completely unsecured, in the home he shares with his wife and 2 young children. Okay. Spafford, 36, charged with possession of a firearm in violation of the National Firearms Act. Law enforcement officers allege he owned an unregistered short-barrel rifle. Prosecutors said that he faces numerous additional potential charges related to the explosives. And again, I saw the commentators pointing out that's a very common prosecutorial tactic. If you're not exactly sure how extensive the case is going to be on the explosive devices, you got the quick and easy charge. Hold them on the gun charge. That's easy to prove and discreet. Hold them while you finish up your investigation of the other stuff, and then you'll charge them with the rest later. Defense attorneys argued in a motion Tuesday that authorities haven't produced evidence that he was planning violence. So, also noting that he has no criminal record. Again, that's what defense attorneys have to do. What else are you going to plead? But, usually the judges say, yeah, okay, I understand that. He has no history of violence, and that's because he's been spending all the time building 150 bombs. What do we think he was going to do with those? Oh, he's just a hobbyist. There's no crime in building explosives. Yes, there is. Oh, I see. Is it a crime to bet on sporting events? Not anymore, it isn't, Krusty. Too bad. You are just ahead of your time. Defense attorneys, offer this explanation or this excuse. Further, they question whether the explosive devices were usable because, quote, professionally trained explosive technicians had to rig the devices to explode them. Well, I mean, it's one of the reasons why it was okay, he thought. A bomb maker knows what bombs do. Why would a person who knows what bombs do keep 150 of them in their house? Well, the answer is they were going to plant them elsewhere. They wanted to do the things bombs do to other buildings, not their own. And so you don't put the fuse in until you need to have it. And that's one of the things that keeps it, quote unquote, safe. He kept unsecured bombs around his kids. There are people who think it's okay to keep unsecured guns around kids because kids can't pull triggers. It's not the best thinking in the world. But, we didn't put any fuses in these bombs. That's why explosive experts had to rig them to explode. But even so, that's what they do anyway. And when the bomb squad comes to remove your bombs, they don't say, oh no, there's no fuses in these things. How are we going to explode them? That's not how a bomb squad explodes things. They rig them, whether there's fuses or not, they rig them to explode so they can control the explosion. So that's not much of a defense. But again, what are you going to do? My client has 150 bombs in his house. All right, well, see what we can do to get it, the charges reduced, I guess. That's the job. But then they go a little above and beyond. There's not a shred of evidence in the record that Mr. Spafford ever threatened anyone. And the contention that someone might be in danger because of their political views and comments is nonsensical, the defense lawyers wrote. Messages were left Wednesday seeking further comment from defense lawyers who signed the motion. Their names are Lawrence Woodward and Jerry Swartz. I guess they didn't get any answer. The investigation began all the way back in 2023 when an informant told authorities that Spafford was stockpiling weapons and ammunition. According to court documents, the informant, a friend, told authorities Spafford had disfigured his hand in 2021 while working on homemade explosives. How did you disfigure your hand? Probably small explosion, perhaps? Prosecutors said he only has 2 fingers on his right hand. That's strong circumstantial evidence. Put it together. He's been working on building bombs. He's just started. He's not particularly good at it yet. He'll be better at it later. And then one day he showed up with 3 less fingers. I don't know what happened. It may be that he was successfully building bombs but unsuccessfully making sausage at the same time. But I doubt it. Also, there was a loud bang from, nobody said that. The informant told authorities that Spafford was using pictures of the president, an apparent reference to Joe Biden, because he was president at the time, for target practice, and that he believed political assassinations should be brought back, prosecutors wrote. No, that's not going to help you. Numerous law enforcement officers and bomb technicians searched the property on December 17th. the agents located the rifle and the explosive devices, some of which had been hand-labeled as lethal, and some of which were loaded into a wearable vest. Court documents state. That's not good for you either. Technicians detonated most of the devices on site because they were deemed unsafe to transport, though several were kept for analysis. At a hearing Tuesday, Federal Magistrate Judge Lawrence Leonard determined that Spafford could be released into house arrest at his mother's home, but agreed to keep him detained while the government files further arguments. And that's the purpose of the gun charge there, to hold him long enough to consider further arguments about how dangerous he really is. Like home arrest, I guess that's an interesting option too. Like, where were all the bombs? Oh, in his home. Oh, okay. Well, how about home arrest at a different home? Maybe his mother's. Presumably no bombs there. You want to make sure that he stays away from the bombs. In response, prosecutors reiterated why they believe Spafford is dangerous, writing that while he is not known to have engaged, past tense, in any apparent violence, he has certainly expressed interest in the same through his manufacture of, well, there's a small typographical error in this. Shall I just read it to you the way it says here? He has expressed interest in violence through his manufacture of Pope bombs, marked lethal. So, was he out to kill the Pope? No, not necessarily. He hasn't said as much. They were pipe bombs, and the government has a point here. The defense's argument is he hasn't expressed any interest in violence. Well, he's built 150 pipe bombs. Well, sure, but they could be for peaceful purposes. Really? Like what? Like, mining operations, railroad construction, perhaps through a mountain pass. I don't know. Dynamite, explodes. And yet we celebrate its inventor and his interest in peace. When I put that in the brief. Okay. But if you mark it as lethal, but it is lethal. He's just warning people who are building railroads or mining for gold using explosives. Watch out. This is lethal. Don't light it as a candle. Make sure you use it in a okay, sure. Anyway, that and his possession of riot gear, which police have. So, maybe they're onto something. They're pretty violent. Riot gear and a vest loaded with pipe bombs. Well, that does tend to signal an interest in violence, possibly in suicide as well. His support for political assassinations came up in the briefings, and his use of pictures of the president for target practice. Well, all right. I'll hold him for 24 hours. We'll see what he can do. Should we put him in his mom's house for house arrest? Has he been shooting at pictures of his mom for target practice? No? Well, then, maybe it'll work out. I don't know. Anyway, now you know why everybody's talking about it, and we'll see what comes of it. Let's see. How about a few other items before we depart for the day? And maybe we'll start with this one. And maybe we have two in combination. We can make it about Trump, and we can save Korea updates for tomorrow. Here, a confirmation of priors of sorts. We're going to send ourselves down the left-wing spiral into, finding out what's really going on, I guess. In our view, craziness when viewed from the other side, I am sure. An entry over at the editorial board from John Storr, who does most, if not all. Is his writing exclusively at the editorial board? You can look it up using the About button. Let's just get to the substance of what he had to say. An interesting thing on which I found myself commenting over the weekend. It was the weekend. Don't lowball Trump's corruption. No, you shouldn't do it. Oh, and that reminds me. Now, one of the things that I wanted to bring up in connection with the earlier stories. Now I can't remember the connection, but it was had to do with what Elon Musk was doing in his connection with government, which was, long story short, that, and then go over to the don't lowball his corruption ideas. Apparently Vivek Ramaswamy, in chatting with somebody, the background of which is all here in this CNN report, says that one of the things that maybe DOJ, the fake Department allegedly about government efficiency might want to do to save money for the government, claw back a $6 billion plus loan or loan guarantee, perhaps, for Rivian. The electric vehicle manufacturer would be, of course, in direct competition with Tesla and gaining a growing part of the market. I see a lot of Rivians on the road. In the numbers that I used to see, Tesla's on the road. Now Tesla's much more ubiquitous, but Rivian's making some real inroads. And I guess there was a 6.6, if I remember the correct number, the $6.6 billion conditional loan commitment from the Department of Energy to Rivian. And the so-called Department of Government Efficiency thinks a really efficient thing to do would be to block that loan and claw the money back for savings, but also just happens to undermine maybe one of the strongest contenders and competitors to the Tesla brand. Golly, I can't believe that would happen. And is this what we're in for? Is this how government is supposedly going to be reformed? Is it all a series of payoffs to Elon Musk and Donald Trump? Well, John Storer mentions that and explores this. Don't lowball Trump's corruption. He will prevent his supporters from facing the consequences of their vote if it suits his needs, even if he has to break the law to do it. This is a more general reminder that if you are counting on F around and find out, you might find that you're disappointed. Although you might be cheering for the possibility of it, Trump will just, if necessary, break the law or ignore the law entirely to, if he's starting to catch criticism for it, hey, we're finding out after our effing around. That's Trump's fault and we're not going to support him anymore. Then he'll just say, you know what? To hell with the law in all of this. We'll just, make it not happen. Since the election, John starts, you've probably heard a lot about FAFO, which is, again, cleaned up F around and find out. It's the idea that voting is a choice and voters must face the consequences of their choices. That's, but that's the supposed to be the upshot of democracy in general. And remember, they're doing away with democracy, so they'll probably be doing away with that kind of FAFO accountability as well. If you are, say, a poor person, you shouldn't have voted for Donald Trump or any Republican because in the end, they're going to betray you. But if you did, well, FAFO, low-income voters did indeed vote for Trump, nonetheless, I would add. According to the Post, he's referring to one of the articles I think we read at some point, 50% of voters from families with an income of less than $50,000 a year cast ballots for Trump, according to exit polls, compared with 48% for Vice President Kamala Harris. 4 years ago, President Joe Biden carried those voters by 11 percentage points, Hillary Clinton by 12, and Barack Obama by 22 points. They're anxious now, the Post said. Remember, we read the article about their worries. Some believed his promise to put them first, but the Republicans around him keep talking about cutting spending and slashing services. Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy, whom Trump has chosen to lead a new non-governmental advisory panel, the so-called DOGE, have said they want to trim $2 trillion from the government's annual budget, a cut that some experts say could be accomplished only by slashing entitlement programs, the Post article said. And then continued, Trump's pick for the White House budget director was a key architect of Project 2025. You know all about that. And GOP leaders in Congress and Trump advisors are considering significant changes to Medicaid and other federal aid. Low-income supporters want him to honor his promise, or what they think was his promise. The Post report isn't alone. Since the election, John says, have seen many stories about Trump voters who are now concerned about what Trump is going to do. Sick people who fear the repeal of the Affordable Care Act. Latinos who fear their families being deported. And now poor people who survive on food stamps but fear them being cut. These stories never fail to get the attention of the FAFO crowd, which is to say of liberals and Democrats who are still smarting from defeat. They take some comfort in the idea that Trump voters will feel the consequences of their actions. The more literate among them might even cite H.L. Mencken. Democracy is the theory that the common people know what they want and deserve to get it good and hard. But the FAFO crowd is giving Donald Trump too much credit. They assume that the Trump administration's policies and programs will affect everyone equally. They do not assume, as they should, that Trump will reward his friends and punish his enemies, which is weird because that's why some of them say they voted for him. If he ends up in the process looking like a hypocrite or committing a crime, so be it. The incoming administration is going to be fantastically corrupt. It's going to take large, serious, and sustained counteroffensives to fight against it, but we might end up underestimating the enormity of the project by continuing to focus on FAFO, as if Trump would not spare supporters from facing consequences if so doing suited his interests. He will try it if it does, even if that means breaking the law. Yeah, probably true. Take immigration just as an example, and we'll read a little bit about it before exiting here. Trump vowed to deport millions of, quote, illegal workers. If successful, he'd decimate the labor supply and hurt big farming states like Nebraska and Kansas that cannot function without, quote, unquote, illegal workers to pick their crops. Knowing that they voted for him anyway, and by huge margins, the FAFO crowd is expecting them now to find out. They probably won't. And the tragedy is, of course, they'll think they were right all along. And maybe they were. Immigrations and customs enforcement will almost certainly focus on, quote, illegal immigrants in states like New York and California, especially in cities like New York and Los Angeles, because they've voted against Trump. Meanwhile, quote, illegal immigrants in Nebraska and Kansas will be overlooked because it's convenient to. Take tariffs as well. Trump vowed to impose them across the board on imported goods from China and elsewhere. The impact could, in effect, be as much as 20% sales tax on everything from sneakers to video games. But knowing that poor people voted for Trump because prices are too high, the FAFO crowd is expecting them to find out. And again, they probably won't. First, Trump's tariffs will be unequal. They will depend on who's willing to bribe him and for how much, and those who won't or can't will face the levy. Those who can and will pay won't. And that's really basically it.
From networksradio.com, you have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
And I know that reinforces a lot of what we've been supposing in the past couple of weeks. It's true, but it's also a pretty good reminder that if you're banking on FAFO across the board, you're still thinking that the law will apply equally to everyone, and Trump is all about not letting that happen. Stay tuned for Justice next.